Hey everybody, welcome back to the garage, and today we are diving into speed density tuning using the virtual volumetric efficiency on the Supercharged, so stick around. This video is intended for educational purposes only. Improper tuning can cause catastrophic mechanical damage, and you should do your own research before attempting any changes like this to a vehicle. Attempt custom tuning at your own risk. Hey everybody, welcome back, and I want to start as always by thanking all of the people who are the new subscribers, all the people who are the ones participating in the chat, the Thursday night live stream, and all of our sponsors, Nitrous Express, ICT Billet, Snow Performance, ADM Performance. You guys, everybody, big family, thank you. We are tuning the Silverado. We are getting into boost already. I did a video already. I'm going to post up in the corner doing cam, kind of cold start, idle tuning to get the thing running so we can get to tuning. It's important to be able to get to the point to properly tune. If you are not mechanically ready to properly tune, you will chase your tail. And this is something I harp on a lot. You have to be mechanically ready. That is, everything needs to be working properly. I found that I had a spark plug not firing that I had to fix, and it was interesting. I was actually in closed loop looking at idle trims, and one idle trim was reading a lot richer than the other one. And in fact, it doesn't even necessarily have to read a lot richer, just that one idle trim was always high, the other one was actually switching, indication something was wrong, but the way that it was reading on the wideband was about right because I had pulled fuel out for the wideband and it would still run like that. So just because your wideband reads good doesn't mean that it is correct. We've touched on this in the past. I did a video. You could go over to tuning101.com, search for wideband, and you will find a video where I show you how the wideband should read versus the narrowband, so you can do a sanity check to make sure that everything is reading properly. So I had to do that myself on this one. Get the problem fixed. You have to fix all mechanical problems before you tune. You cannot solve any mechanical problems through tuning. Don't let anybody lie to you and say that you can. If there's a mechanical problem, it will exist before and after the tune, and the tune will be incorrect whenever you get it solved. So we have started the speed density tuning portion of this. We're doing speed density first. I don't necessarily trust the math and the location. It's in a short section after the intercooler. I like that section because it allows me to run the IAT that's in the math as opposed to having to break it out. But it is such a short section, that's a lot of S's in there. Such a short section after a 90 degrees, we're not getting much laminar flow in there, so I don't trust it specifically at the lower RPMs where we're trying to tune right now. We're going to address that later on and just focus on virtual volumetric efficiency. Remember, this is VVE, this is 5th gen. A lot of the 4th gen follows some of the ideals behind it, but we're looking at the 5th gen version of it on the Silverado. And we're going to jump over to the laptop right now. I'm going to show you a couple of things that I changed up front, and then we'll walk through some of the steps. Now, I am not doing this in the old process of going through doing pulls, showing you necessarily in the truck as we do it, because I've already done over 30 logs and changes on the truck. That would be so many videos that we would never get the truck tuned. I would not be able to get the information to you in a accurate way. So we're just going to look at some of the changes we've made. And if you have any questions, hit up the comments down below. Okay, we're diving in. We've got the current tune that's on the truck versus the factory tune. In fact, we're looking at a factory tune because I wanted to look at a couple different things that are going to affect how we tune. The big thing being that if we go over to the general tab, we are running a 3-bar map sensor on this. This thing is already made 20 PSI, and we have the potential to make more. We've got a smaller pulley. We're probably going to shoot for around 26 maybe at the top end of this thing. So we have a 3-bar in here. We do have to bump up our max estimated map, which we might be able to get 254 out of. I'll have to do the map. That might be where we start to run out of issues on that, but we can still go beyond that. That's not a big ordeal. If we look at our volumetric efficiency table, we have changed this over to 3-bar. So we've got a lot of data on here. What we can do is you can toggle between 1 bar, 2 bar, and 3 bars. If you go into the row axis, choose edit, and it'll bring up this drop-down menu. The defaults are what we like to stick with. 1, 2, and 3. So you see right here, 1 bar, 2 bar, 3 bar. We are on 3 bar, which actually goes out to 298. So we've got enough overhead on our mass airflow or our volumetric efficiency table. The other thing that we need to be aware of is that there are fueling zones going on in the background. This is what will end up causing us to fight ourselves. Specifically, if you go from a 1 bar to a 3 bar, all of your fuel zones are going to max out in this area up here. You are going to have all, however many, 20 some fuels, 29. All 29 will be up in here basically. You might actually, technically, you'll have the first 27 in there, and then the last couple will be down below that. And so this is a big area to fill data in. So we've gone in, as you can see, and we've kind of chopped this up based on the boost pressure that we're going to run. So up to 15 PSI, that's our last transition, 15 PSI of boost. And then beyond 15 PSI, we've got one big cell. Hopefully that'll work for us. We'll see how it responds. We may have to go back in and scale those out. Something else I like to do though is pay attention to where the brakes are on these things. So you see whenever our table is laid out here that we have evens on the RPMs, and then we have 0.04 for every skip down the table starting at 102, or actually we'd start at 10, 14, 18. So it's 0.04 for map pressure, technically it's pressure ratio. I like to use those whenever I go in and set up my table. So if we go underneath dynamic, we have zone RPM boundaries, and you can see where I've set these up on evens. So the boundary is a boundary I can see. A lot of these will be set up on odds, say 1500 as opposed to 1400. You've got a 1400 and a 1600 region. There is a boundary split in between those that we cannot see on the table that might cause some wonky numbers in between 14 and 16. So by adjusting these over to the even numbers, it gives me a little clearer idea of what's going on. So zone 0 through 1 is 0 RPMs up to 1400, and then 1400 to 26 is going to be zone 1, 26 to 36 is zone 2, zone 3 is 36 to 48, and then 48 up to red line is going to be zone 4. So you have technically a zone out here. These are the divider lines. There's zones on both sides of these numbers right there. So same goes with our pressure ratio boundaries, or if you're on a 4-gen map boundaries. Zone 0 to 1 goes up to 2500, and then of course it's actually stepped out a couple different spots over here. But same ordeal. Our zones do not end at 2.02. That is the start of the last zone. Keep that in mind. Spread these out a little bit, and I like to make them fairly even sized because of the math that goes on in the background. Whenever we make these adjustments, it'll allow the zones to calculate a little bit more cleaner based on the data. Especially, we might have to shift some of these because of transitional data in that zone, and we'll have to build a zone across a bad area. But we can go in, start doing some scanning, and then make the decision to do that. Now, the other thing that I've done is I've gone in here and I've kind of blown out the volumetric efficiency table and picked a peak area of boost to make maximum power. That's what this is out here. This is a lot more airflow than we're probably going to see. If you look down in this area, we're about 5 PSI where this break happens right there. And so we ramp the fuel up there to make sure we're tuning from the rich side back down. It's going to be even worse on my setup because of the auxiliary fueling and the methanol injection. And so those will eventually skew this thing down, and it's going to flatline pretty hard. But I wanted to make sure as we work from idle up into boost that we have plenty of fueling available to keep everything nice and safe. So I just go in, pick an area down there, and what I'll do is I'll take our highest level, which is going to be around 102, and I'll copy that one in, and then I'll go to where I want to create my peak, say in this case about 218, and we'll paste it in, and then I multiply it a couple times, maybe by 3 to create that peak. After creating a peak, we go in, we go back down to where we started and do our interpolation option to give us somewhat of a graph here. It won't be perfect, and then we want to interpolate back down the other way. Keep in mind that we do have a fall off in volumetric efficiency at the bottom of the graph there. Just make sure that it has decent numbers and that you're not getting into any negatives on that end. Theoretically, if we were to push out to 30 psi or so, we would have to move this peak down and then interpolate it the other way. But now we've got a table that looks kind of like this. Whenever we calculate it, it should smooth out. Did not smooth over, so we can actually smooth the peak where we chose it. If we come in here, select just the peak area, and smooth it down a couple times. Get a nice transition. There we have a peak. So that is a way that I like to quickly set up a volumetric efficiency table to get it out there and start tuning on it. So we can look at a couple tunes here and see what's going on there. Okay, so I've got open one of our logs in here, and you can see how I've skewed this thing fairly rich across the board from the get-go. This is right after getting the truck up and running, taking a look at it, and this is kind of what I was hoping for. We're looking at 10 to 20% rich idling around. We got her up to 2,000. In fact, I got her up a little bit higher than that for a bit. We went lean up there the first time in the boost. We would have to go in and make adjustments. If we make adjustments for a situation like that, we want to look at where our RPM threshold is. 2,600, we're not really concerned about making so much, but if we were to go to 2,800 and 100 kPa, we would follow that into our table and look at, we'll go over to the other one, manifold open. 2,100 RPMs, which is going to be in between this one and then 100 kPa right here. So we know at this point, specifically this 16, 17, we're starting to go lean there. We go back, look at it, we're at 5% up to 20%. So to give myself an idea of where I'm at, I'll do 1.05 in there. And in fact, you could copy and paste this just as easy, and I'll show you what I mean, and do it that way. But we want to keep in mind that this is just an indication of where we're going to be lean. I'm going to paste this whole percentage as opposed to half this time, and that's because we are so far off. I want an indication of where we're at. So we are going lean the further out that we go. I'm going to come out here, stretch this area out, and I'm going to shift this area up until it falls in line, which is about 20%. In fact, it was exactly 20%. 4 clicks at 1.05. You see now we got a transition 1561 to 1585. We then use our interpolation option. I like to interpolate it down to existing data where possible. And we filled in this area. We'll go back the other way a few cells and fill this area in by interpolating this area. Keep in mind, we're looking to keep this cell right here about 1561. If we calculate these coefficients, it drops down a little bit. So that's why we're still going to be a little bit lean there next time, but it had to do that in order to get the math to work across the entire zone that we had there. And that's why I talked about whenever we edit zones, making sure that if we have an area where we can't get the math to work, we need to narrow that zone down to make the math more simple. But 1561 down to 1512, we're pretty close. We're still going to be a hair lean there, but we're not going to be 20% lean there. We'll probably be 2% lean there. So we would leave that kind of as it is, go out there, load this tune up and run it and keep going. So let's look at a later tune where we're closer to the actual tune that's in the truck now, or a later log, I should say. So here is the last log that we pulled, and we're to the point now where we still have some stuff out to about 10 degrees, but we're making these adjustments in half percentages to fall in line. In fact, if we were to go in and look at a previous log, the one right before this, we should get an idea of how far off we were beforehand versus now. That was not a good log. Here we go. Okay. So this was literally the log right before the one that we just looked at. You can see that we were in the 10 to 15 range of being lean out on top. And then as I said, if we go in and look at where we're at now, we should be below 10% lean out on top in most of these spots. Yeah, so we've dropped this down to 8, 6, 5 by using the half step. The nice thing about the half step, specifically on the volumetric efficiency table, is that half steps tend to keep the math a little bit more sane, keeps it from skewing off and going crazy. Now, if we do a full step, we need to make sure and smooth and blend as much of the table as possible to give it every chance to calculate these tables properly. But doing a half step like this, you could almost just take this table in, copy it, paste it, and then just calculate it. So if we were to, we'll look at it, paste special, we'll multiply by 0.5%, and you'll see the change on here. If you look closely in that area whenever we calculate, there, it smoothed it out because the changes weren't so drastic. We didn't really need to do a lot of smoothing in this situation. So keep that in mind. That's one of the reasons why we like to use the half step on the volumetric efficiency in particular. And it also keeps us from overshooting our target and thus hunting, to lean rich, because the idea is to get it as close as possible. And then it's nice to go in and say, okay, let's shift this a little bit rich, 1 or 2%, and then we'll leave it as is. Let closed loop dial in the idle and cruising fueling at that point in time, and then we know we're rich whenever we go into wide open throttle. Okay, so that's kind of the basis of our SD tuning for the initial stages. As we get this thing closer to dialing it in and finishing up virtual volumetric efficiency, I'll do another video and we might do some on-the-road tuning where you can see me making these adjustments, and then we'll pull a log, see how the adjustments end up working, things like that. But for the first one, I wanted to give you the overall approach of what's been going on already. As I said, I'm about 30 tunes in on this thing. And so if I were to document every single tune adjustment I made, this video series would never end. But you know enough from my previous videos and what we just talked about to get to see what the process is, how I am doing the process and how the process works. It's not that complicated. It is more time consuming than complicated. So if you have any questions, hit up the comments down below. Don't forget to check out the live show Thursday night, 8 Eastern. And I've got plenty to do, so I'm going to get back to it. You know the drill. Thanks for stopping by the garage. ABT. Always be tuning.